Hey guys, Daniel here, and in this video, I'm going to sculpt a lion in virtual reality, 3D print it, make a ceramic shell, and then cast it out of aluminum bronze.
So the original idea for this project started several years ago when I got some clay for Christmas one year and sculpted the body of a lion. But at that point, I didn't exactly have the equipment that I needed. Later on, I got a VR headset and I started learning how to sculpt in VR, and here's a little clip of me sculpting the lion in VR. And I didn't exactly know how I was going to turn it into metal yet, but I'd figure that out later. So this was the first version of the lion that I finished years ago and then didn't touch for a long time. Once I got the equipment that I needed, that I'll talk more about later, I came back and prepared it for casting by putting a sprue on it and flattening out the feet so that it'll be able to stand flat on a table once I cast it out of metal. In the sculpting program I had messed around with the colors and painted it, so here I'm just turning it all a solid color with the paint tool. I'd played with the sculpting tool over the years since I had last worked on it, so I went back and touched it up. And the really cool thing about this is that you can expand the model and make it as big as you want to. So I can make it really big and sculpt on the teeth with really fine detail, or I can make it smaller and work on the broad strokes. And that pillar is going to make the sprue that I can pour metal into later. During the first printing attempt, part of it broke, so I had to repair it with hot glue and some old filament strands just wound around it, and it held together and it worked for the second attempt, so that's good. But eventually I got a real repair. I printed it at a 0.1mm layer height to get as much detail as I could and to try and keep the layer lines from showing up, but that did make the whole thing take 30-something hours to print. Another one of the things that I've learned to do since I last made videos was 3D print lithophanes, which are these really cool pictures that when you hold them up to light, they show a black and white image, but when they're not, it's just a relief of the image. And I've actually started an Etsy shop where I sell these. There's a link to my shop in the description, and if you'd like to support me and help me keep making videos like these, then please consider buying one.
I'm also doing a free lithophane giveaway, and to enter, you have to do these 4 things. You have to like the video, you have to subscribe, you have to follow the Instagram in the description, and you have to comment that you're entering. If you do those 4 things, you'll be entered to win a free lithophane.
So anyway, back to the lion project. Even though I printed it at really fine detail, there were still some layer lines that I wanted to get rid of, so I sprayed it with spray paint and sanded it and sprayed it again and sanded it over and over until it was really smooth and shiny, and then let it dry one last time. Here I am putting a funnel onto the lion that'll guide the metal into the mold, and the whole thing will make more sense once I put a shell around it. See, all of the 3D printed stuff becomes negative space for the metal to flow into. One of the things about the material that I'm using to make the shell out of is it doesn't let air flow through. So if you don't have these little vent tubes, then you'll end up with bubbles in your cast and it won't turn out right. So I have this wax printer filament that wasn't very good for printing, but it's great for making these little vent tubes. And it was pretty fun to put together. And here's the whole 3D printed lion with all of its attachments and modifications ready to be dipped into the ceramic slurry to make a shell. And the first thing I had to do was stir up the mixture, and some people use fancy cups to measure the viscosity, but it was new, so I was pretty sure it'd be fine. So I had to dip it in carefully enough to make sure that it didn't break any of the vent channels, but you also have to make sure every part of it gets coated. And you kind of let it drip a little bit after to make sure that it's all pretty even. Then I coated it with some fine silica sand, making sure to cover up everywhere to make the first shell. And then once you've done that, you hang it up to dry. And there's a lot of different tools and things you can use to coat it, but I don't have those, so I just use my hands. And I think this is called like the cat box method or something. And one of the neat things about this specific brand is that it turns orange with time so that you can know when it's dry and when it's ready. And this is after the second coat, and you just have to keep on adding more and more coats until all the different structural pieces become strong enough to withstand both the high heat of the kiln and metal flowing through it, so you don't just accidentally break it. Now that it's dried out and it's got all the shells on it, I'm putting it upside down in the kiln to both burn out all of the plastic in there and to harden the shell. And this kiln gets really, really hot, let me tell you. So hot that all of the metal that was placed inside just got oxidized and became a crumbly mess. See, this is the metal that I placed on the bottom of the kiln to catch any of the plastic to keep from getting all over my equipment. And now the shell has been fired and it's able to withstand the heat of metal being poured inside, but there's still some plastic bits in there, so I was trying to blow them out and everything, but I got the air compressor going and that made sure to get all the dust out of there, so I'll have a clean cast. Now it's clean and ready to go. Now it's on to getting all of the metal that I need for this project, and this is a failed axe head that I made a while back, so I'm chopping it up and hammering it into pieces so that I can fit it inside of the crucible. And it's pretty annoying because aluminum bronze is really abrasion resistant, so it took forever to cut through this thing. And this right here is a bucket of aluminum bronze scraps from other projects that I'm going to melt down and use for the lion as well. And to make the metal for the lion, I decided to make some more metal by mixing copper and aluminum, 90% copper, 10% aluminum by weight, just to make sure that I would have enough to get the pressure I needed to fill up every part of the mold. And one thing I did with this project that I haven't with others is melt down all of my scrap and new aluminum bronze first and make nuggets with it, and then melt down those nuggets again to make the lion later. And one really cool thing that sadly doesn't show up on camera is when you add aluminum to the copper, it's an exothermic reaction that makes it get extra hot and glow even brighter. After melting down all that metal, it's time to pour it to make the nuggets. And don't worry, I know it looks scary, but we have hoses nearby and the grass is a little damp, so it can only burn right near the crucible where it generates enough heat to both evaporate the grass and burn it. And here I am scraping out the slag, which is just impurities and oxidized metal that floats to the top that you don't want to be in your final product. And part of the reason doing it in two phases, this nugget making phase and this pouring phase, is better because you get to scrape out that 2 times instead of just 1. And the melting point of aluminum bronze is around 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit, which means this stuff's pretty hot because it's got to be super heated so that it doesn't cool off and freeze instantly the moment it touches the air or the nugget pan. And what's happening right here as I put the nuggets in the water is the Leiden frost effect. The nuggets are so hot that they instantly vaporize the water around them, forming a bubble, kind of protecting them and slowing down their cooling.
Yep, that is the color we are after.
And now it's finally time to prepare the lion for casting. So I kind of bury it in sand a little bit to make sure it's stabilized and to make sure that the heat has somewhere to go without burning stuff and causing all kinds of problems. It glowed pretty hot for quite a while after, and we turned off the lights to get a pretty good shot of it, and it's pretty cool. And now is the moment of truth. It's time to see if all this work pays off. Just toss it in water and slowly hammer off the shell to reveal what you've made underneath. Decided to start with the funnel because that was the part I cared least about, but looks like it turned out okay, which is promising. And moved on to the head next. That was the part I was the most worried about because it was above where the metal entered the cast, but it looks like the pressure from all that extra metal above and the funnel was able to push it up into the head. The vent tubes worked pretty well. They allowed the air to escape out of the head of the lion, and even a little bit of metal went up into them, which I was pleasantly surprised about that, so it seems like a pretty good technique that I'll continue to use later on. And now I had to cut off the sprue and all the other parts and grind down anything that wasn't supposed to be there, and then polish it, which is my least favorite part because this metal takes forever. And the reason I had the sprue enter in on the back instead of his head, even though it probably would have been easier to cast if it went in on his head, is because I had to be able to grind it all down and made it so you didn't even know it was there. And the back was smooth enough to get away with that, whereas the head had hair and other stuff. And so first I tried using a Dremel tool to smooth out the back, but it didn't quite have enough power, so later on I went to Harbor Freight and upgraded and got a sanding disc for my angle grinder and was able to move more material more quickly with that. And then for the smaller places where little tiny vent tubes and stuff left marks, I got smaller attachments for the Dremel tool and ground those off. And to fix that wobble, I set him down on top of the belt sander and just left him there until his feet were the exact same height, and now it sits flat on a flat surface. And then just to sand down everything and help smooth it out and get it ready for polishing, got some hand sanding paper and just went to town. And here I'm using a Dremel attachment with some buffing compound, just going over the whole body of the lion, trying to get it all nice and shiny. And then I gave it a bath to wash it up and see what the final result was.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and check out my shop in the description if you want to see more content like this.